Hi seniors, today is day 2 of Unit 4. We're looking at GDP. Our big question for today is how do we calculate GDP? We're going to be able to identify the target range for a healthy GDP, calculate GDP, and then differentiate between intermediate and final goods in order to evaluate what items to include in GDP. We need to do this in order to properly calculate GDP. Ties in with our one content standard here. We're looking at the rate of economic growth. That is GDP. And we have key terms as well. We'll have key terms quiz 8 and 9. The first one coming up here is on Wednesday, April 25th. These are the key terms for today. Economic indicators we looked at yesterday. You should think about inflation, GDP, and unemployment as the 3 major economic indicators. And then today we'll look at GDP, final and intermediate goods, and then net exports. We'll save this last term for Monday. Looking at your do now, when we define GDP, you should be sure to include all 4 components. It's the market value of final goods and services produced within a country in a given year. All 4 of those must be satisfied in order to be part of GDP. Then in number 2, we're looking at what things contribute to GDP. We're looking for consumption. Anything that you buy at the store, it could be a soda that you purchase. Business investment is going to be I. It's going to be anything that a business purchases. Could be like a computer, could be paper, could be a new building, could be robots or machines. Government purchases is the third one, so anything that the government purchases. It could be a new aircraft, it could be paper for government office, could be a vehicle that they purchase for government use. The last thing is net exports, and that's going to be your exports minus your imports. So anything that is traded, so anything that is sold to other countries and anything that is bought from other countries. Think about selling soybeans to China and buying cars from, say, Japan. All of that would be included in net exports. The bottom part of your do now, you wrote the equation up here. It's going to be C plus I plus G plus NX, which is net exports. And then after reading this article, you should be able to answer that the level of GDP growth that's considered healthy is 2 to 3%. And so that ties in with our learning objective, identifying the target range for a healthy GDP. And then looking at these numbers, we can see that 0.8 is low, 1.4 is low, 3.5 is high, and 2.1 would be healthy or within the target range. And all of this data comes from the BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's the government agency that compiles all of this data and produces these reports on GDP. Couple notes and examples for GDP. Again, our definition, market value only includes the price the buyers will pay, only something that is sold. If you make something and use it yourself, there's no market value. To have market value, it must be bought and sold. Final goods, anything new that's ready for consumption, not things that are used to make something else. We'll go over that in greater detail in a second. Produced within a country, so made in this country, not made somewhere else, must be made within this country during a particular period of time. Typically, it's going to be a quarter or a year, and we'll look at more examples of that too. So final versus intermediate goods. We have your definitions for both of these. Final goods are going to be things that we purchase off the store shelves. Intermediate goods are going to be things that are used in the production of final goods. So the inputs, the resources, the factors of production. A simple example would be rubber that comes from a tree, but we don't buy rubber in that form. We buy rubber that has been turned into a wheel or a tire that goes on a car. And so we buy tires, we don't buy the rubber. The rubber would be intermediate good, and the cost of that is already included in the cost of a tire. So we avoid double counting by only including the final goods and services. Here's a few scenarios. Pause the video, take a look at these, and I'm going to go over them. So the first one, wood is an intermediate good because it's used to build a house. When you buy a house, you buy the cost of the breakfast from McDonald's, food that you buy, you're going to consume it, that's a final good. Gas that you pump into your car, you're going to consume that gas because you're going to burn it when you're driving your car, and so you're using it. You're not going to be giving it to somebody else. Cotton that's used to make a shirt is an intermediate good. You buy a shirt, you don't buy the cotton. The cost of the cotton is already included in the cost of the shirt. Movie tickets, that's a final good because you pay for the enjoyment, the entertainment, the service of that movie. Gross domestic product, where is it made? We only want to include things made in the U.S. And so things that are made by foreign-owned companies or American-owned countries that are produced in the U.S., then they are included. as long as they're made in the U.S. Things that are made overseas, even if it's by an American company, it's not included in GDP. The exception is when it is traded, and then it becomes part of imports. And so think of Toyota. Cars produced by Toyota in the United States are included in GDP. Cars produced by Toyota in Japan and then sold in the United States, they would be part of imports, and so then they would be included in GDP. But otherwise they would not be included if they are not part of trade. Period of time, know the terminology, quarter, 1, 2, 3, and 4, taken the 12 months, divided into 4, and we take those different segments to measure both GDP and unemployment, and I guess also inflation as well. Right? So typically we're talking about time periods. It's either going to be quarter or a year, most typically. The expenditure approach, this is how we calculate GDP. So this is our next learning objective. We're going to be adding up our consumption, the value of everything we consume, the value of everything that businesses buy, the value of everything that government buys, and then we're going to add to that exports minus imports. So things we sell minus things that we buy. Here's some data from 2012. The U.S. GDP is $15.6 trillion. 2/3 of that is consumption. Investment and government spending are about the same. And then exports minus imports, in this case, is going to be negative. 2.2 minus 2.8 is negative 0.6. So we add negative 0.6 plus 3 plus 2.1 plus 11.1. We're going to get 15.6 for GDP. Here's another way to look at it. With a bar graph, again, the largest percentage of GDP is personal consumption. So economists look at how much are people buying? Are people consuming goods and services? They're particularly interested in this during the holiday season, especially in October, November, December. Are people confident with their jobs? Do they have financial security? If they do, then they're probably going to spend a lot during the holiday seasons. If not, then consumption is going to be down. So anytime people spend money, they contribute to GDP. Again, businesses and government is about the same, and the net exports is going to be a little bit less. And here's data showing the size of the economy growing from 1950 up to 2010, going from just over $2 trillion all the way up to over $15 trillion here a few years ago. Personal consumption has always been the largest portion of that. Now, to calculate GDP, you're going to see some situations like this. I have 2 examples for you. You have to know your equation, then you're going to be given some data, and you're going to take that data and plug it into your equation. And so you're going to get 335, 105, 90 plus our net exports, negative 25, and we should get $505 trillion. In this next example, pause the video, do this one on your own, and then I will do it for you. Okay, we're going to take our equation, and we're going to plug in our data, 456, 117.75, and negative 20. Now, where did we get this negative 20? We have to do 275 minus 295. That's the net exports. 275 minus 295 equals negative 20. We add them up. We should get $628 trillion. Homework is GDP practice worksheet number 1, handed out. It's also available on Schoology. Study for the key terms quiz on Wednesday. Go back to your learning objectives. Do you know the target range for GDP? Do you know how to calculate GDP? And do you know the difference between intermediate and final goods? If you can do all of that, you should do well on the homework, and you should be ready to move on. Let me know if you have any questions.